this computer. Welcome back, everyone. Ben, welcome back. I hope things are good in Colorado. Before we got together, I realized that you and I haven't been doing this long enough to take like the 3-week hiatus that we took. I guess it's kind of selfish on our parts to do those things, but nevertheless, life goes on. I think you had a vacation in there, and whatever else is happening in life. I'm still at 400 feet above sea level, and you're still at too high of an elevation to be comfortable for anybody else.
6,661 feet.
Very good. Very good. So you're up in the mountain, I'm down on the plain. And you're also wearing a pullover. And I've been told by the internet that we're now officially in the season of fall. However, here in Memphis, I'm sweating my face off. It just happens to be better lighting in my own backyard. So there we are. It's supposedly fall, but by the leaves that are falling off from the drought, it seems like fall, but it's not actually fall here in Memphis yet. But nevertheless, we digress. Part of fall though, Ben, is football season, and I was thinking about this the other day. Last Saturday, as my alma mater, Texas A&M, go Aggies, dig 'em, was playing against the Arkansas Razorbacks. If you want to make fun of me in the comments, please feel free. But they lost. But the more important thing is what happened to me on that Saturday. Guess what happened to me last Saturday as I was watching the Aggies play football.
You became more and more upset as the team that you love lost, or
yes,
it became clear that they were going to.
Yeah, it was very clear very early on that they were going to lose. And I was upset for a couple of reasons. One, because my team was losing. Nobody likes to see their team lose, right? The Cowboys, my pro team, they haven't won a Super Bowl or been any good since the mid 90s. And so I've kind of given up hope on them. And I had some hope for the Aggies, but as the Saturday was going on and as the game was dragging on, I realized more and more how frustrated I was getting with my kids, that they were getting bored because I wasn't giving them any attention. And then I was getting frustrated at myself because I'm like, well, I just want to watch this game, but I know I need to be paying attention to the kids and playing with the kids. And so I had this in my mind, I had this wrestling thing going on in my mind. And it was very frustrating. So at some point I quit watching the game and I went and started to make dinner because that was a productive thing to do. And my daughter was able to help come and make cornbread, and I was able to do some other stuff and be more engaged as a father. But does that ever happen for you? Is that a thing that concerns you or that happens to you where you want to do something, but it impacts your vocation as father? Am I the only one?
No, I've had that happen before. And like you, I feel frustrated with myself once I realize what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately that frustration comes out, but not at me, at the people that I love.
Right.
Or those that are close to me. And I don't think it just happens as a parent. It happens in your job and other things as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I've definitely felt that a number of times, because whether you're going on vacation or you're watching a football game, whatever it is, the moment comes up and you just want vacation's not vacation for parents.
Right.
You know this.
Yeah.
It's vacation for your kids and
Sure.
for the grandparents or whatever you're doing.
Right.
Because you're still like, all of a sudden you have kids, you're always working, doing something in some vocation that you're in. And so, I come home from my day and I want to just kind of have a debriefing, and my house is just an uproar and excitement.
Right.
And my bride has been with my kids all day, and I've largely been listening to my own thoughts, and my wife has not. So I get overwhelmed, but she's already been overwhelmed.
Sure.
And
so what's bouncing? What are we wrestling with in our own head? What is it? What's the conflict in our heads and in our hearts that's causing the consternation for us and that spills out as frustration? What do you think what do you think's going on in our heads and hearts that's causing such conflict?
The process of dealing with life in that you're making decisions, but
Mm-hmm.
I often get frustrated with a circumstance that I can't control.
Mm.
That is outside of my control. And I know it,
Mm.
and that's okay. And I'm not
Right.
mad that it's outside my control, but somehow it impacts things that I can control and
Mm-hmm.
is my job to work out.
Sure.
And so I think maybe one frustration is coming to terms with my drive home is a little longer than yours, so I can
Right.
use that a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to try and debrief. But if you don't, then you're still kind of, you haven't put these things on the shelf yet by the time you
Sure.
walk in the door.
Right.
And so you're still trying to work that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the frustration becomes, one, I haven't put those files back away where they belong on the
Right.
bookshelf of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the realization in the moment that I'm being poor at these other vocations right now.
Uh-huh.
And I'm disappointed in myself or
Yeah.
something to that effect. And I want to
Uh-huh.
step it up, but then all of a sudden the fatigue or something. And they're not
Sure.
excuses. This is just the reality of what
Right.
it is. All of us have been there.
Yeah. And I think that's what it, part of it is reflecting and seeing what it is. I noticed for myself, different than filing everything away and compartmentalizing, is there's a selfish desire. Like, well, I've been working all day. I've been doing stuff for other people and thinking about things for other people and yada yada yada, doing those normal workaday things that we want to try and, as pastors, oh, we're working on Bible studies and we're doing all this stuff, but it wears on the mind. And I have this selfish desire of like, well, I just want to break too. I don't want to play catch. I don't want to watch the thing. I don't want to play with this. I don't want to unload the dishwasher. I don't want to parent. I don't want to do this. I just want some time for myself. And I get mad at myself for being selfish and for neglecting whatever obligations, opportunities, satisfying the needs that my kids have of me. And I the selfish part of me is like, they can just do whatever they want. But then there's another part of me that is like, well, I shouldn't be selfish because I need to be with my kids. I need to be satisfying that vocation as father. Is that?
I'm right there. When I get home, the way that I kind of clear out the cobwebs is I get on my mountain bike and ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm better. This isn't a good thing necessarily, but I'm better at asking my bride for those times of me time than my bride is doing that for herself.
Okay.
Because I think I'm more selfish than she is.
All right.
And that's why it's not necessarily a good thing that I get home and I put things away. I make sure the house is okay.
Right.
And then say, hey, can I go for a bike ride? Totally oblivious to everyone in this house needs something like that too. Whether it's Gus homeschooling and focusing on schoolwork, or Gemma just trying to keep up, or Edie trying to keep them out of each other's hair.
Sure.
And so I've found that it helps for the household if I can step right into dad, right into husband immediately and say, you go for a bike ride, my bride. Kids, what do you want to do?
Right.
And then I might have a little bit of chips to say, hey, can I get a 30-minute bike ride in instead of the hour that I normally would prefer?
Sure.
And so I put a reminder in my phone actually today, believe it or not, before we even sat down to talk on this exact thing, so that I can feed my family's spiritual love tanks and before I ask for my own.
Sure. And well, I think that's an important, I think you put a reminder in your phone. I think you told me earlier and you just mentioned, but I think that points to an important principle. And that principle is to be deliberate about it, to recognize the selfish desire and to recognize to recognize for me, the selfish impulse, and to push it, to set it aside and say, hey, this is my need, but are there greater needs? But it's that deliberate, thoughtful, I'm going to make the decision beforehand sort of a thing. And I think I think that principle can carry over into a number of different aspects of life. What do you think about that?
I think so. I think we can hold ourselves accountable. It's nice to have other people holding you accountable to these kinds of things, but that gets kind of difficult in life. So at some point it's helpful if you have the discipline or can create the disciplines to hold yourself
right
accountable. And I have a calendar, a note, and reminders that I use for those, so I can put those things out of my mind, but then they come back in when I need them to keep me reminded of what my vocations are.
Sure.
Whether it's father, pastor, husband, friend, things like that.
And so it's not, I guess, we're as Lutheran theologians and just people in general, we probably need to hold things in tension, right? So it's not to say that we don't need a break. It's not to say work yourself to the bone and don't go on your bike rides or don't take the time that you need for your own things, but to hold those things in tension, right? It's sort of a both and kind of situation.
I like the way you said that, holding it in tension. It's a very Lutheran thing to say,
right?
But I find myself saying that more and more, and people starting to grasp onto there's a tension to all of this, because you can fall off the theological horse on either side, the political horse on either side. You can also fall off the vocational horse on either side. If I spend too much time with my family and neglect the church, well, there's a trickle down effect to that too.
Sure. Or, what about, so what are some, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So what are some ways that we can do, because when you come home, you have things that you need to do at home. There's other errands and other things that you need to do and take care of. So what might it look like to step in, come home from work and to do the things that you need to do, but also in your situation to give Edie a break, or in my situation, when Janet comes home from work, what are some of those things that it would look like to balance that out, to spend time with the kids, to step in, but to also get the things done that you might need to get done?
That's a good question. I think what I have done is create a plan on my drive home.
Okay.
What do I want to do with the rest of my day? And Ian, my bride and I made a pledge to each other to our first question of the day, outside of our prayers and our devotion, is to ask ourselves, how can I be the best spouse that I can be today?
Okay.
And then how can I be the best parent that I can be today? When I'm driving to church, how can I be the best pastor?
Sure.
So I compartmentalize my life. I know not everyone does that or can, and that's just kind of how I deal with it. But on my way home, what needs to get done, what would be helpful to get done, and what would I like to get done, and then kind of work through that kind of a plan. But I also guess I have to be ready to pitch the whole thing out the window, depending on what I walk into.
Right.
I remember, actually, speaking of this, I just got the bill for it. This is why I committed in my mind. Or in August, actually, it was the end of July. My parents were here for my children's birthdays. We were celebrating them at the same time. And 2 days before my daughter's birthday, I'm at work. I'm in the middle of the workday, and I'm pressing towards being the best pastor I can, so that I can put that where it needs to be, and get ready to go home. But towards the end of my day, I get a call, and my bride is in tears. I can hear someone in tears in the background. My daughter was running upstairs, and all of the door handles are right at her eyebrow height. She caught one, and the door stayed there, and she kept moving, and she got a nice laceration straight through her eyebrow. And stitches need to happen. And so all of a sudden, my life is very different, and how do you
Right.
react to that?
Right.
And for me to say, well, I don't have time for this. Well, that's not going over well.
Right.
You know, it was like a Friday. I'm getting ready. That's my last day in the office before I have Saturday off most of the time. And so I need to get things done and make sure things are in place for Sunday. And that was out the window. That was gone. And so those things also ratchet up stress and chaos, and how you react to any of that.
Right.
And emotion and frustration enter this dynamite grenade of every single day. You don't know where it's going to go.
Right. So there's sometimes you just have to react and respond to whatever the situation might be, right? And I guess, but not every day you have a trip to the urgent care, right?
Right. Right.
As I think about this, is it what would it look like to include your kids in the things that need to get done around the house? Now, so your kids are of a different age than mine, but I rarely unload the dishwasher anymore. And that's it's a little thing, but it fits into the bigger scheme, in that one of the ways that I show my wife love is that I try to have the house clean for her when she comes home. So that when she comes home, she can talk to the kids, she can have some debrief time from her job, and just slide into other parts of our life together as a family. Well, it's a lot of pressure on me to tell the kids to go and play after they've been at school all day, but then, to get them in the process of cleaning up the house and making sure it's all set. That way, the things that I need, that my wife needs, that they ultimately need life skills, and it's their house and they need to have some responsibility, but to bring them along, and while they're unloading the dishwasher and I'm helping them to put the things up high away, I'm able to talk to them about their days. And so now I'm killing two birds with one stone, so to speak. And that I'm engaging with them, but I'm doing the other things that I need and want to do. But I've brought them along with me, as opposed to setting them off to the side and completely compartmentalizing that. I realize my kids are older than yours are, but that idea of bringing them along and into those tasks and duties that need to happen in the house.
I think something that is very brilliant in what you're sharing is the little amount of work now actually mitigates a lot of work in the future with regard to your children. I actually did something similar last night. We finished dinner, the kids weren't listening, so we didn't have quite enough time to just go straight to the tub, or we had too much time to go straight to the tub. I needed to stretch it out so they're not waking up at 5 a.m.
Right.
And so I said, oh, they said, can I be excused? And I said, well, take your plate over the counter. That's what you do. We're getting close to, they're doing that well.
Right.
And as prompted, when they say, can I be excused? I say, yes, their plate goes over with them without me saying that task. So now I need to add a new task.
Right.
So I'll go over with them, rinse it off, and then say, okay, you're putting plates away, you're putting utensils into the dishwasher or something like that. Or depending on how much dishes we had, we'll just wash them then right there. And we're getting to the point where they'll be included in that. And then these other conversations can be had. And I think you're right to add that along with some conversation. I actually have a question on my calendar in my phone, on my iPad, on iCloud, so I can see it on my computer as well for each day. And it's a different question, particularly when my kids are of grade school age, but a question for me to ask my kid to spur conversation other than, how was school today?
Sure.
Something like, did anyone get in trouble today? Or how did someone fill your bucket today? Whose bucket did you fill? And in this language that then we fill, but every day of the week, I have a different question to ask my kids that I've thought through, particularly for the future when they grow up, so that if I'm struggling to have those moments of clarity or put all the things away, I have a little helper in my phone that I've created. Did you like your lunch today? You know, just rate it on a scale, rate your day on a scale from 1 to 10. And it just gets them talking other than, well, how was your day? Because that's that's I think, expected. That's predictable.
I think you've got two principles at work here. One is, there's a couple, I think, well, it's more than two. There's a couple of principles. One, the little things, the little examples of our kids doing the dishes in the ways that they're capable of now, gives them responsibility. It gives them buy-in. It teaches them that, and it shows them that they're a contributing part of the family, right? So they're not,
which gives them a sense of pride,
right?
They want that.
It gives them a sense of pride. It gives them a sense of place. It gives them a sense of responsibility. It's life skills, and it teaches them without specifically teaching them that they are not just consumers in the family, but that they are participants in this thing as family. And so that's an important thing. And for our conversation right now, it's happening to center around the kitchen, but I think it can center around cleaning your room. It can center around yard work. It can center around the weekly cleaning out of the vehicle, or straightening up the house, or cleaning the bathroom, or whatever it is, including the kids, including the children, as they're capable in the responsibilities of the house, to give them buy-in. The second thing that you're mentioning is consistency. And consistency is so vital in parenthood. It's holding that consistent pattern. I think, I forget where I read it. Maybe I forget where I read it. I won't make it up. But to expect, you have to have the same, as a parent, you have to have the same standard 100% of the time, and you need to work towards 100% fulfillment of whatever the expectation is. Now, it's not going to happen, and so you just build on that building consistency, but you have to hold to it, right? That you can't get up from the dinner, you can't get up from the table until mom and dad say you can be excused. Once you're excused from the table, the expectation is to take your plate. And you got to consistently enforce that and build on it. And third, in having that question that you ask your kid, your children, you're investing in them. I don't want to say you're treating them as equals, but you're engaging with them and showing that you care, that, hey, no, I want to hear about your day. I want to hear about the details. I'm going to press you because I care. One thing that I read in a book called Parenting is Heart Work, and I'll put a link in the description. The Parenting is Heart Work. I think this is where I read it. I don't remember, but I'll put a link to where Parenting is Heart Work, because it's a good book. A little thing is, every morning or whenever you see your child, stop what you're doing and greet them by name and say, hello, Tommy. Hello, Susie. I'm glad to see you, and to remind them that they're important and that you value them. And so I think those are three principles that we're kind of hitting on here: the buy-in to the family, the contributing to the family, the consistency, and then I don't have another C to make this to buy into it, but that greeting and that cherishing them, showing them that they're important in just little ways.
I remember going back to the dishes real quick, because this story is just too great not to tell. I remember being in a class with Dr. Bierman, a professor of ours from seminary, and we were talking about this kind of vocational stuff, because even though we haven't quoted any scripture yet, this has everything to do with how you go about talking with children about being good children and being a good student and being a good citizen. It's also why I tell parents, look, if you don't buy into the faith thing, I don't say it that way, but if you don't buy into the faith thing as far as confirmation, I can only help your children become better children and better citizens and better contributors to society. And so while we're talking about this in a society and culture class with Professor Bierman, he said that when raising his two girls and son, that they were having conversation at the table, and one of the kids said, "May I be excused?" and just picked up their plate, went over and started doing the dishes, which was always the expectation. Do you remember this story?
No, but keep going.
But then when this child went to do it without being asked, it actually just flowed from their vocation. And it happened 2 or 3 days in a row where they unsolicited, they said, "May I be excused?" And then they cleared the whole table without being asked and started doing their job. Then dad stood up and said, "You know what, today you can put those dishes in the dishwasher." And all 3 kids said, "We have a dishwasher?" But they didn't even know that they had this amazing machine, this magic machine. And then the next day he said that this child said, "Can I use the dishwasher?" He said, "No." And I go back to that one particularly because my kids are in the process of learning what their vocations are in the home to help with the home, to uplift the home and contribute to that themselves. I keep that in my mind to see how savvy Dr. Bierman was to what he was doing. If the son had just gotten up the next day and cleared the table and put those dishes in the dishwasher and started washing them without being asked again, you know, maybe now we raise the bar to a whole other expectation because they're starting to get vocation. But it wasn't there yet. So it was 3 great steps forward, 1 step back, but we're doing okay. And I really, and he wasn't mean about it. He just said, "No, you're doing a good job though. Keep washing the dishes." That's what it is.
And I think that there's a tie-in here to take us back another step in the family chain here. And that is because good children flow from good parents, and good parents flow from healthy husbands and wives. And so the things that we've been talking about, you know, putting a reminder in your phone to do something with your kids when you come home, to being consistent, to being deliberate, to being thoughtful and cherishing and holding your, you know, if we hold our kids to a high bar for behavior, hold ourselves to a high bar, those same principles apply especially to marriages, right? That that you would stop and take a moment whenever it is you first see your spouse after the day, at the end of the workday, to stop and greet them and say, "Hey, how was your day? I'm glad to see you." To set those reminders. And I'm horrible at this. If my wife ends up listening to this, I know I'm bad at this, but to set those reminders for regular date nights. It doesn't have to be every week, but to be consistent and deliberate about what those things are, and to set a high bar for conversation and for cherishing and doing those things. If you're going to do those things with your children, and it's important that you do them with your children, you should also do them with your spouse. And this goes for both ways. We happen to both be husbands, but it goes both ways for wives as well. And again, these are these vocational things where we are in our vocations to our children, whereas God is to us, right? We're what our children think of our Heavenly Father is what they experience from. How they experience us is how they're going to firstly think of their Heavenly Father. But then how husbands and wives relate is going to point to Christ in the church. And so in this family unit, we have this very powerful image. And I'm pulling from Ephesians 5 here, and I think Paul is going to talk about husbands and wives in Philippians, and then we've got all those wedding feasts and the bride and the bridegroom images from Jesus's ministry, right? So this is all very scriptural ideas here that is then playing out in our daily lives.
So we've talked a lot about the home side.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that are there times where it kind of has gone the other way, and getting your mind right in the pastoral mindset, something throws you off, and all of a sudden, kind of like that football game,
Mm-hmm.
you're frustrated that this thing has consumed you. Is it bad that it consumed you? Is it bad that you're frustrated?
That'll
Because
work.
things come out, and you're the
Mm-hmm.
thing that is, I don't know if I could ever be an EMT.
Okay.
Not from the actual ability to do the job,
Mm-hmm.
but you're always seeing someone on the worst day of their life.
Sure.
Police officer, not always the case. You see some good. Pastor is really a mixed bag.
Sure.
You get the joys of weddings and baptisms and confirmations and faith
Right.
growth, but you also have death and divorce and sin, and
Yep.
just put that together and you get the bag of life.
Right.
So because of the uncertainty of that roller coaster, have there been times for you when something hit you at church as pastor, and you were frustrated that it consumed you as much as it did? Not necessarily saying this is bad, but you're just
Right.
you were processing it, and it took up so much time or mental capacity.
I think I can't think of any specific times, but I think what happens more for me is that, especially on Sundays, is that I come home at the end of Sunday, at the end of the workday on Sunday. So I get home at like 1:30 or 2. I get to church at 7:30 in the morning and get home 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've just been on my feet and talking and teaching and engaging. And I come home and I'm just tired. I'm just physically, well, I'm not so physically tired, but the mental and the spiritual drain is such that I don't want to do anything. I just want to come home and eat lunch, look at my phone, and then give me like a 30-minute power nap. And I'm not always good at saying, hey, just give me an hour. Give me an hour to come in and decompress. And so sometimes I lash out would be the word, but that's maybe too dramatic. I'm not that expressive of a person. But if I can come home and say, hey, I just give me an hour. But then if I take more than an hour, I circle back into that situation where we started our conversation, where
Exactly.
I want the rest of Sunday to be about me. But then everybody gets bored and gets stir crazy, and then I get frustrated because they're picking on each other. But really, it's my fault. It's their fault for picking on each other. But and they need to own their actions. But there's some responsibility on me for not engaging with the kids, especially to keep them from getting overly bored, and engaging in those different ways. So then we circle back to where, kind of where we started this conversation.
Right. I had one just 2 weeks ago. I shared it with you, and that was when I came into the parking lot and saw this woman sleeping on the asphalt. She was homeless. I actually thought I was going to be calling the police because I was going to be reporting a dead body on the property.
Yeah.
I even told her that I'm glad you're alive.
Yeah.
Because it was down into the low 40s, upper 30s, and it had rained all night. She was sleeping by the river, and she moved up to get out of the valley where the river is in town.
Right.
And I was not expecting how my emotions would hit me that whole day. I didn't, it's not that I don't know what those emotions are or how to deal with them.
Sure.
I was just not expecting to deal with that day.
Right.
And so pulling me out of all worship prep, all sermon prep, all Bible study and confirmation prep, and just being with the people
Mm-hmm.
this is someone's daughter.
Yeah.
I have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes downhill from there. I remember the day my son was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to get flowers for my bride and a teddy bear for him and a
Mm-hmm.
card. And I'm sitting in the lobby of the hospital writing, and all of a sudden water hits the card.
Uh-huh.
Where the heck did that come from? And it's coming from my face. Why is my face leaking? And I circled it and said, and wrote on the card to my bride, I don't know how to explain how proud I am of you and what you've done for me and this family. And this tear that I didn't expect expresses that. And then the girl came and it just threw things. I can't watch those pet commercials or the children commercials that they're wanting you to adopt them, because they hit me differently now as a father. I'd never had those responses to those things. And so similarly, when I was dealing with this woman, Bree, I spoke with her for like 7 hours that day. And I got home, and the only thing I couldn't process was that her thought for the best scenario, let's sleep on this asphalt of this parking lot, because that's better than what I had. And I couldn't get past that, and what her emotional state would be to put herself in that position. And I learned a lot of those things from her, but it was heavy to the point that I wasn't actually able to, in that time, in that moment, assess what I was thinking. So, and, you know, we've been talking all this time along. On your way home, be regimented and do this. Set reminders on your phone. Be intentional about life. But what about when emotions pull you flat out of that? God has given us emotions. They're not bad things. I like the movie Inside Out, the Disney movie, because it teaches you not, emotions are good, but letting them control you isn't good. Well, this emotion that God gave me, I couldn't do anything about it. It was just in front of me the whole day. I mean, it took me a while to process. All of it.
And I think it might be comparable to the cut across the eye, right? Where it becomes an emergency, and it's appropriate for those. It's appropriate for mom and dad to shake their plans to deal with an emergency. I think it's also appropriate for the family to adjust for an emergency for mom and dad. Right. I mean, you almost have to, right? Whether you're deliberate about it, everybody in the family will respond, because you're a family unit, and it's going to go together in that way. But I think that it all goes, you know, you used the image earlier of chips, you know, and filling buckets and different images like that. And I think that's the regular day in, day out sort of thing shows to the children, hey, I'm here for you, I'm caring for you, I'm going to respond to your emergencies. But then, as you've taught them that as dad, as mom, that they're your priority, then they have some confidence to fall back on when you need to pull back because of an emergency, right? And
which means that and one of the reasons why I think this whole conversation is important is because not every day can you be crying wolf, that this is an emotional emergency. If everything is always up here, then when something truly significant comes along, well, how is this different than yesterday's chaos? So that's where I think this whole discussion of being cognizant of your vocations as parent, child, whatever your job it happens to be, citizen, and weighing these things, it's important that you're also assessing and comparing.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I actually don't really like comparing a whole lot, because sinners like to compare to other sinners, and that leads to sin.
Yeah,
But
it can.
we're comparing circumstances of our own lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And so similarly, how have you built, how can your family respond in those emergencies? So you were talking about that emotional burden from your Sunday. Um, I guess it was just last week now. It doesn't feel like it, but um, there was an emergency here in town, that my pastoral heart said I needed to go and be at the scene of this emergency. But that required that I not be home when my children normally come home, and they had to let themselves in. And again, they're older, and Janet was on her way home, so they weren't home for very long, where she was able to fill them in. But there was, I had a whole lifetime of mostly being home when they get home in the afternoon, and showing that I care, and building up
Right.
that trust and that confidence, and building that rapport, that relationship, filling the bucket, at building up the chips, whatever it might be, that I felt confident enough to not be here that particular day, and to not come home until, I think it was, I don't think I got home till 6 that day, which is not terribly late in the grand scheme of things, but significantly later than my normal pattern.
Yeah.
But again, there was a whole building up to that, to where the family was able to respond to what was an emergency for me.
And if not everything is an emergency,
Right.
and you're assessing things for what they are, and your children see, they start to understand how to assess
Right.
what's emergency or
Right.
not. Then when you say, hey, this is an emergency, they go, well, I don't know all the details, but it must be bad, because
Sure.
that's not what my dad normally
Right.
does. And there's, well, even in the midst of that chaos of the emergency, there's trust there,
Mhm. Right. Right.
because you've been consistent. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
There's
gonna
a
take.
book.
Oh yeah.
There's a little book that my son likes to play with, so it ends
Okay.
up moving all over on my
All
shelf.
right.
And this is the abbreviated version, but there's a larger version by Dr. John Townsend called
Okay.
Boundaries.
Oh, huh.
Can you see that?
Maybe I see. Yeah, I can see boundaries and,
There
and
we
then
go.
authors. There you go.
This book, this is the abbreviated Cliff Notes version.
Mhm.
The full one is really helpful, and I've used it before in premarital advising when couples really are seemingly struggling with boundaries. But that's kind of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
is self boundaries and self-awareness to your vocations. And
Mhm.
all of this stems from scripture. And
Yeah.
that's why one of my favorite parts of confirmation, it's hard to say that, but I like talking about the 10 Commandments,
Mhm.
because it's not this heavenly dad figure screaming at you, don't
Right.
do this. This is what it looks like to be in this household.
Mhm.
In this household, when you ask to be excused, you take your plate to the counter
Right.
and you wash it,
Right.
or you clear the table. This is what it looks like to be in this family. And
Mhm.
we're setting healthy boundaries for them.
Right.
And that's what the 10 Commandments are.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
it's
they give
really
you.
beautiful to see that.
Yeah, and the 10 Commandments and those expectations give you that buy-in and that purpose and those boundaries and all of those other things that we've been talking about earlier, um that function in a family, and all of those little ways that we've been alluding to. And I guess let's wrap up on this, and that I think this can be an intimidating conversation for people to come into, and to think, it's tiring, but it's kind of easy to be the parent to an infant and a toddler, right? Keep them
Oh
alive,
yeah.
change
Your
their diaper,
your sleep is tough, but
your
everything else is easy.
right, feed them, change their diaper, keep them warm,
Keep them
um,
alive.
keep them alive. And then as they age into that preschool age, and that 3 to 4 year old range is when it starts to get even a little bit more difficult, and it can be intimidating. But I think what we're talking about here is it's just the little things, right? It's not any one giant thing, but it's that consistent engagement and thoughtfulness, and being deliberate about just all the little things, so you don't have to do anything dramatic, but you got to do something, right? It's not
Yeah.
necessarily about being perfect, but it's about doing something and being engaged as a parent.
I think you're spot on. When we talk about looking at a child being respectful or reverent to their parent, I think what the parent should be asking themselves, instead of going, oh man, that's just a good kid. Instead, that's a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
What did that parent do?
Yeah.
What kinds of consistent things were they doing to cultivate that response?
Sure.
And now you're off and running on what it looks like in your home. I
Right.
was seeing, was it a congressman said today that parents should not see themselves as the primary educators of their children.
Mm-hmm.
What are you
Right.
talking about?
Right.
I remember expressing a frustration to you early on this year or earlier this summer when we were deciding to homeschool my son, because we were concerned about our children not having the socialization.
Oh,
And you said, well, I get that, but that's just for their joy.
mm-hmm.
They learn to socialize from you.
Right.
And I was like, well, yeah, gosh, that's duh. That's absolutely right. I was just thinking of him saying, this is an emergency. I don't get to play with kids, instead of it being, well, we need to get you to play with kids, but I'm going to teach you how to talk to people and how to be appropriate with people.
Sure.
And even when the neighbor kids aren't being appropriate with my child, I need you to use your words or go get a grown-up.
Right. Yeah. And it's the consistency of engaging with that, with having those conversations, and holding to that expectation, and doing it day in and day out, even when it's, obviously we're not going to be 100% at it, but being consistent through it all, and thoughtful about it. Well, Ben, I think we've probably circled around that conversation enough for today. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me again, and I'm glad that I was able to talk with you. So let us know in the comments what you want us to talk about next. Let us know what are some of those consistent things that you do with your kids, and how have you done that in the past, and what does it look like in your home? Even if it's, tell us about how you taught your kids to clean the kitchen, or do their laundry, or mow the grass. That's the next thing I'm teaching. I'm tired of
always
mowing
looking
the
for
grass.
ideas.
Indeed. Well, Ben, blessings on your day, and blessings on your ministry, brother.
Thank you. You as well.